Hi there, my name is Sam from Worlds.com. Welcome to a new camera comparison. This time between the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. While the Xperia has 12 megapixels on all three cameras, the Mi 11 Ultra has a 50 megapixel wide angle, a 48 megapixel ultra wide angle and a 48 megapixel telephoto camera. But before we start, if you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now let's start straight away with our camera comparison. Let the facts speak. Alright, let's start off with a video comparison. So, the cameras are set to 4K 30 frames per second. And this is what the ultra-wide lens on both phones looks like. You know how they say that the grass is always green on the other side? Well, trust me when I say that it has never been as green as in Xiaomi's video. So, there's a little bit of oversaturation happening here. The Mi is just a lot sharper than the Xperia, which looks very blurry. This gets better when switching to the wide camera, but it's still not as sharp as its competitor. Both phones had little software errors while recording with this lens. The Mi 11 had a problem with its focus and the Xperia randomly decided mid-video to add in more light, which looks a little bit weird. Besides that, the Mi adds a pink tone to Casper's face, which also looks a bit wrong. So what happens when we stop moving? Well, there's still the big difference in quality, as the Xperia always looks like it had a softening filter applied. And when cropping into the picture of the wide camera, you can spot a lot of grain on Sony's side, while the Xiaomi is very sharp. Moving a bit closer to 3x zoom, the Sony gets very soft again, while the Mi doesn't change a lot. Same goes for the max zoom, which is 12.5 times on the Xperia and 15 times on the Mi. The Xiaomi pretty much maintains its quality, while Sony loses out on a lot of detail and sharpness. As far as stabilization goes, both do a good job, but Xiaomi definitely is a little bit more steady than Sony. What you could also see here is that the Xperia has problems with its dynamic range, as it gets very dark sometimes. In the second part of the test we turned on Xiaomi's Ultra Stabilization mode, something that Sony does not feature, and to be honest we can't really notice a huge difference to before. Sure, the Mi is again a bit more stable than Sony, but that's about it. In terms of the macro capability, both phones do an equally good job. Although the Mi seems a bit sharper, but that's just Sony's strange softener again. And how do the phones perform when an object suddenly appears in the frame? Well, both seem to have a little bit of a problem with the shiny font in this example. But overall the Xperia definitely has a faster and more accurate autofocus than the Mi. Talking about speed. If you are someone that likes to slow down, both phones got you covered with their slow motion video feature. The Xperia is able to shoot 120 frames per second in 4K, while the Xiaomi is capable of 1920 frames per second in 1080p. So this is pretty much a decision between higher quality and more frames per second. But as a side note, to access the 4K slow motion video feature on the Sony, you have to use the Cinema Pro mode. Otherwise you are fixed to 120 frames per second and 720p. Alright, before we make the transition from video to photography, we have to show you another crucial part of smartphone videography. The front camera. So this is actually the sound and video quality of the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. And this is the sound and video quality of the Mi 11 Ultra. And now without further ado, let's see which of the competitors shoots the best pictures. So let's dive right into the photo comparison with one of the most tricky parts of smartphone photography, the rear camera portrait mode feature. So we already know that Sony somehow softened the picture a little bit. But the two major differences in this case are the higher saturation and stronger contrast on Xiaomi's side, which gives it the upper hand especially in these harsh conditions. Besides that, there's a little software failure in both pictures, at the right side of Casper's head. In the second image, both pictures actually look quite similar. Although, despite the very sunny weather, Sony is still a bit too bright. In the third sample, the different approach to color management is probably the most obvious. Sony's picture looks very flat in comparison to the Mi. On the other hand, we notice another failure in Xiaomi's software. So, that's a point for Sony. And in the last example, both did quite a good job. Although the Xperia is a bit too bright and flat for our taste, and the Mi adds a pinkish touch to Casper's face. Now let's turn around the phones to see how the front cameras are managing the portrait mode. As you can see, the results are quite good. considering the camera is facing the sun, except that the Xperia blows out the sky. This is something that will occur in all selfie pictures. So I'm just going to mention it once. In the second photo, both do actually quite well again, except that there are some minor failures in Sony's image, as it somehow sharpens the light on the wall in the background. And in the third image, Sony again has problems finding the outlines of Kaspar's head. Therefore, there's something like a sharp halo around his head. Props to Xiaomi, they managed this one much better. So far so good. Now let's check out all the different cameras of the rear camera system. Starting again with the ultra-wide camera. At first we couldn't spot a significant difference, besides the different color management, of course. Quality-wise you can only notice a difference when cropping in. As you can see, the Xiaomi is a bit sharper as already seen before. Same goes for the wide camera, where the Mi is a bit sharper again. But here it also gets obvious that the Xiaomi has more contrast. That also continues in the pictures with 3x zoom. This time Sony's image actually appears a tiny bit sharper, which is not the case when switching to 10x zoom. The Xperia already seems to be reaching its limits, while the Mi maintains its sharpness in an impressive manner. And with a max zoom, which is 12.5 times for the Xperia and 120 times for the Mi. Well, I guess the digital enhanced picture of the Xperia speaks for itself. In terms of the macro capability, you can get slightly closer to an object with Xiaomi's phone, which is also brighter with a tiny bit more detail than the Xperia. Before we switch over to nighttime conditions, here are some samples for you to get a better feeling for the strengths and weaknesses of the two camera systems. Okay, as you can see right here, this is what the front camera portrait mode of the two contestants looks like with dimmed artificial lights. So while the Sony uses a warmer white balance than the Xiaomi is a little bit sharper. The second picture is in the same mode but shot outside, so with even less light. As you can see, both have their problems, but mostly the Sony lacks contrast and it's not as sharp. Now let's see how the wide camera performs. There is again a difference in terms of the white balance, and there are more details in Xiaomi's shot. It is very different when moving outside. As you can see in this shot, the Mi is able to get more details, which gets very obvious in the trees behind the light pole. Also, the flares around the lights on Sony's sides are just too overwhelming. In the third example, the main difference is obviously the sharpness, which the Sony certainly is lacking. And in our last sample, it's once more the Mi with a better quality. It is brighter, sharper and has more details, while the Sony may look a bit more natural. Ultimately, it is on you to decide what you prefer. In terms of the nighttime videography, the two again differ a lot. While the Xperia again is darker and loses details in the dark parts, both have tons of grain, but the Mi is certainly sharper and has more details. The wide camera of both phones is definitely a lot better than the ultra-wide. The main difference in sharpness and coloring are still the same, except that both got a little sharper. So, how did the new Xperia perform against Xiaomi's latest flagship phone? Well, in our opinion, Sony still has a lot of work that needs to be done in order to be able to compete with their main competitor from Asia. We still think that the possibilities of Sony's newest phone surely are great. But in order to achieve those possibilities, Sony needs to adjust their software to increase the experience for the base customer that isn't a photography professional. At this point, the Mi 11Ultra definitely has a much more sophisticated camera system. So we would recommend Xiaomi's device if that is a deciding factor for you. In the end, we hope that we were able to show you the most important features to help you decide which of the two phones you would prefer to buy. If so, let us know in the comments below which camera you like the most. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. Till then, take care and see you soon.